two warriors will fight it out in a head-to-head battle over 3 minutes. The object is to inflict as many hits on your opponent as possible. And
forget everything you know about VR. Forget what happened with VR in the past 20 years. Virtual reality starts today, and this is very, very exciting. March 28th has seen the launch of the first commercial VR headset of 2016, the Oculus Rift, although I'm not sure it can honestly be called a launch. As of the writing for this video, pre-orders have not been charged, and devices have still not shipped to those who have spent $600 on the tech. Anti-consumer software restrictions and a missed and frankly botched shipping period has left many anxious VR enthusiasts with a bad taste in their mouth. However, those who are getting their hands on the Rift, whenever that may be, will be eagerly jumping into Oculus's bundled games, Lucky's Tale and Eve Valkyrie. I've gotten the chance to play through Lucky's Tale, and while this was on Oculus's Development Kit 2, the preceding analysis will focus on the game's mechanics and is not a review of the final consumer version of the Rift. After coming out of an hour-long session and writing this video, my brain is confused. Virtual reality is quite powerful, and if you've gotten the chance to use a proper headset in the past 2 years, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. And no, Google Cardboard is not a proper headset. Our lizard brain is easily fooled, and today's VR is so convincing, my brain is currently telling my body that I'm moving upwards, even though I took the headset off 15 minutes ago and I'm staring at a static screen. Lucky's Tale's levels are each designed similarly, in that your character progresses in an upward path, focusing on verticality in a way that utilizes available space, which in turn cuts down on required system resources. In VR, this presents some awesome vistas, ones that make you feel as though the game world is opening up before you on your desk. Nausea has been synonymous with the VR technology from the 1990s, and while the tech has advanced significantly, it's unfortunately still very much around to this day. To clarify, nausea that's experienced in VR today is more often tied directly to the experience and is not necessarily tied to the hardware. High field of view, low persistence, advanced displays containing high refresh rates, and robust tracking solutions all come together to prevent the user from feeling ill, yet this can still happen in an instant with bad VR game design. Simulation sickness is well documented, with its research spanning back as early as the 1950s. In 2005, the U.S. Army Research Institute for the Behavioral and Social Sciences conducted a study named The Introduction to and Review of Simulation Sickness Research. This research states anyone with a functioning vestibular system is prone to motion sickness, and thereby also susceptible to simulation sickness. The U.S. Army's research found that age plays a major role in the susceptibility to motion sickness, with infants under 2 being completely immune, and the highest chance of susceptibility belonging to those who are 2 to 12 years old. Motion sickness is something that's very rare in adults over the age of 50. In summary, anyone from the age of 12 to 50 is susceptible to motion and simulator sickness. Reason and Brand's 1975 research on motion sickness has found that between 95 and 97% of people studied eventually adapt to motion sickness through repeated exposure to naval travel. The same study found that motion sickness is highly specific, with Navy sailors needing to readapt to the different motions in larger oceanic vessels after getting used to the motions of a destroyer. In order for people to adapt to motion and simulator sickness, they need to be repeatedly exposed and, unfortunately, get sick from the exposure. In the early days of Oculus's public VR devices, Valve was testing how users felt playing their classic games in VR. Team Fortress 2 introduced a VR mode, giving a few different look methods for use in the DK1. Mode 0, which was seemingly the most popular config at the time, used the head tracker as a mouse, while also using the mouse as a mouse. Mode 1 attached the gun to the user's head, and the mouse was used to turn the player's body. Mode 2 used a keyhole aiming method, claiming the most comfortable configuration out of the 3. Despite the comfort of Mode 2 compared to the others, the overall experience was still relatively uncomfortable. Locomotion by means of keyboard or joystick is not a pleasant experience in VR, and mouse or joystick being responsible for yaw aiming is downright nauseating. Half-Life 2 also received the VR treatment, giving players the option to play around with different aiming styles. Again, a keyboard and mouse combo used with VR goggles quickly thinned out the number of players that were able to play for more than a couple minutes without needing to lay down for hours, squirming around on their bed, ingesting as much Canada Dry as humanly possible. The experience, while still rough and uncomfortable, was so compelling, people continued to subject themselves to the nauseating gameplay, building up their tolerance to simulation sickness. Users urged others to get their VR legs and soldier on through Half-Life 2 in a new way. Over time, these users became accustomed to Half-Life 2 VR, and I think these kinds of people are going to really push for a future market of experimental VR games. Like with Reason and Brand's findings that 95% of people can build up a tolerance to motion sickness, I think we're going to see similar numbers in VR simulation sickness tolerance. Now, this isn't to say that these experimental puke rides will become the norm. In fact, in the early days of VR, VR games will continue to avoid design decisions that create simulation sickness as much as possible. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The Oculus-funded Playful Corp is well aware of simulation sickness and have done some clever work with the camera for this 3D platformer to help ease any nausea. The third-person camera follows the player's character on a rail, but there are moments when the player has to stop and wait for the camera to catch up. The camera tends to speed up considerably after detecting the player is too far ahead, which can be pretty uncomfortable. The camera works really well for forward progression, but if you ever need to backtrack, it becomes a major annoyance. Sure, you can look behind you, but the forward-facing design is very disorienting when you find yourself reversing through the level. The act of 3D platforming is the easiest it's ever been thanks to VR. Enemies feel as they are the correct distance away, and floating platforms are a breeze to jump between. My favorite parts in the game take place in a small-scale subterranean model, moving the camera out and changing the 3D world to more of a 2.5D platformer. While showing this on a monitor will appear uninteresting, once in the headset, you can really appreciate how great VR is at conveying differing scales. The models are tiny, like cute, familiar toys that make you want to reach out and poke them. The transition to the surface is equally powerful, where the closer camera makes the game world feel, and I hate this word, immersive. I wish the game had more of these underground sections, or simply had whole levels taking place on a smaller scale. There's plenty that the Oculus studio could have done in the story mode to make the worlds feel truly varied and unique. The opening 3 or 4 levels introduce you to all of the enemies you'll face throughout the entire game, which is overly apparent once you reach the midway boss. The second level showcases my favorite enemy in the game, a round, bat-like bomb carrier which throws bombs that you must pick up and toss back at the bat to defeat. The midway boss arena is nothing but a wave defense against enemies you've already faced. Some are slightly scaled up, but still able to be conquered in a single ground pound. The boss segment closes with a single, gaze-based bomb throw at the big baddie. And speaking of bombs, these are the only useful pickups that you'll find in Lucky's Tale. You won't find star power or mushrooms, and that's really a missed opportunity. I can't recall any moments that stuck out by giving me satisfying power over my enemies. There are some skill jumps to hidden areas containing a 1-up that were greatly appreciated, but as far as the main path's enemy placement is concerned, I felt myself wanting much more. Once you've blown past the first 3 levels, you'll come to a notification requiring you to go back to the same levels and play the bonus modes, which are coin collection and a time trial. For myself, these modes would be much more enjoyable if they weren't a requirement for progressing through the main game. There's this awful disconnect with continuously running through one mode, then needing to backtrack to earlier levels with different objectives. This disconnect makes the bonus levels feel more like busy work than optional yet enjoyable side objectives. Super Mario 64 had a very similar mechanic back in the day, but the difference was each level had multiple objectives that all played differently from one another. There's too much repetition in Lucky's Tale. Beat story mode, go back and collect red coins. Go to the next story mode, go back and collect more red coins. You've unlocked the next level in story mode, beat that, go back and collect red. It's a chore and a bore. The coin collection is also the most frustrating game mode, and I wouldn't exactly call it a fair challenge. After the first level, there are no checkpoints throughout the stage, so if you die just as you're about to grab that last coin, you're back to the beginning of the level. Missing any coins when you reach the end drop-off also takes you to the start of the stage, which was incredibly disappointing after seeing how they handled the first world's collection mode. The first level placed a large door at the start of the player's path that would only open when the 5 red coins were collected in that area. Knowing I had 25 coins to collect in the level, I had assumed I'd be seeing more doors that would act as both the checkpoint and as a way to ensure the progress I was making was not wasted. This turned out to be one of many mechanics that were introduced in the first level, and forgotten about for the rest of the game. Playful were clever in hiding these red coins. The spinning collectibles spawned distinct sounds that made my head turn to pinpoint their exact location. Some were hidden behind trees and bushes, requiring my upper torso to lean in and examine the game world. The use of a positional camera you control with your head is quite enjoyable for the time you'll spend in Lucky's Tale, and I'm very excited to see what other developers use in different genres, like in RTS games. It's quite obvious that Playful were looking to create a Mario 64 level of impact on the Oculus Rift. Unfortunately, Lucky's Tale feels more like a game that was made to fill an arbitrary quota of unique experiences for the Rift. Despite borrowing heavily from the Mario franchise, it does not stand well on its own. But it's not all cloudy skies, though. The small-scale underworld segments alone provide a sense of scale that's just not possible anywhere else, or with anything other than a VR headset. Playful played it safe with its camera and game design. A move that I'm not sure I'd make differently if I were in their position to create a launch title for the virtual reality kits. There are a handful of novel experiences that become soured by repetitive game design, and I'd really like to see another developer take a stab at a VR platformer. I think there's a lot of potential for this type of game. VR should definitely be viewed from other angles than just first-person experiences. With time, I think we'll eventually see that Super Mario 64 for VR. But in order for this to happen, developers will need to start taking risks.